want to double click a bit on the AI part. If you speak to someone that's got an established business, they've got a specific way how they think about AI, how they're introducing it. If you speak to a brand new business, it's actually quite scary how they're AI native with everything, like every single part of the business.
So either people who are building something new from scratch, who want really fast prototyping, and people who are experts at lots of AI tools. But we also spoke with a company recently who said, I don't want anyone who's interested in using AI at work. We have these gigantic legacy frameworks. It's not going to be useful. They're not going to use it here. Because, and this isn't going to apply to all businesses, but hiring someone is a highly complex decision that is very difficult and very painful to reverse.
What's up, builders? My name's Bobby.
And I'm Renier, and this is How Would You Build It, a podcast where we interview South African startup founders, business builders, and tech innovators.
And if you like our content, make sure to hit that subscribe, follow us for more, and we'll make sure to bring you the best interviews, unique insights to help you build better and stay ahead. Enjoy the show. Welcome everybody to another episode of How Would You Build It? It's another great episode lined up. We've got the CEO of OfferZen to join us, Matt. But before I get to Matt, I always have to introduce my co-host, Renier. Welcome. How are you doing this afternoon?
Great, Bobby. Lucky to be here. Excited about the conversation.
Yeah, we're starting to gain some nice momentum in our second season, our revival of How Would You Build It? And to do that, we got Matt Beck, as I mentioned, from OfferZen, who actually was in a breakout room with me at the OfferZen, at the Open Letter event a few weeks ago. And in the breakout room, we had a lot of engagement, and we thought, what a great opportunity to bring Matt onto the podcast. So Matt, thank you for joining us yet again. It's great to have you. Welcome.
Happy to be here.
So Matt, you come from quite an extensive career. It has a very strong marketing feel to it, but you're now the CEO of OfferZen. Can you just maybe tell us as we start about your journey as a head of marketing that has to now take over at OfferZen in a very interesting time when the whole dev market has really been turned upside down with AI and so forth. So just tell us about that journey in a nutshell.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm sitting here in the OfferZen office in Gardens in Cape Town, but I'm American. I moved here 7 years ago because I used to work for the ed tech company 2U, which acquired the South African-based company Get Smarter, run by Sam and Rob Paddock back in 2017. And so I came down to Cape Town to run marketing for the Get Smarter business, which essentially is online executive education courses from universities like Oxford, UCT, Stellenbosch, MIT, Harvard, et cetera. And that is where I really saw the power of marketing in action. We took that business from around $50 million a year when I came down in 2018 to $160 million a couple of years later. And that was directly through performance marketing. So it became the largest global advertiser in LinkedIn, as an example. The full business was spending close to half a billion dollars in advertising dollars every year. And, I joined that business as employee 80, and I left that business when there were 6,000 employees. And so at that point in time, I was really eager to get back into something small and where I could really get my hands dirty. And I was interested in moving away from managing other people's brands and wanted more flexibility to be creative and do really fun things. And so for me, the boxes that the next opportunity had to tick were a brand that people really loved and that I could do a lot with. Something that had a high resting growth rate. So if you turn off advertising tomorrow, there's still a business there. And something that had found a niche and really capitalized on that niche. And OfferZen ticked all those boxes. So after about 6 months chatting with the founders, I decided to come on as the VP marketing. So I did that for the last, for 2 years. And about a year and a half ago, the founders asked me to take over as CEO. And Philip and Milan Joubert, who founded the company, also had a big role in SnapScan and Luno and Root. And so they've done this a bunch of times before, found a market opportunity, built a business around it, plugged in a CEO, and then advised. And it was the time for that transition again. And so, I stepped into the CEO role in January of 2024, which, as you mentioned, is a really interesting time for developer hiring. Because in a nutshell, basically, after COVID, everyone got funding, everyone had money, everyone went on a hiring spree, everyone started new businesses, and then that really crashed in mid 2023. And tech hiring today is actually at a lower point than it was during the worst part of COVID. So it's been really a trial by fire in the first year and a half for me as CEO. We've gone through a bunch of changes, trying to respond to the market and build a sustainable business. Yeah, and that's how I got here. And I'm firmly Cape Townian at this point. I have my Springboks Barbarians tickets for Saturday. I'm not going back to America anytime soon. It's a great time as an American to not be in America. So happy and proudly in South Africa for the long term.
Hey, no one's going to bomb anyone in the southern tip of Africa, right? So, I mean, we're pretty out of the way when it comes to those things.
Like I told my family, if there's World War III, come down here and we're going to drive straight to Namibia. You know, that's the safest place you're probably going to be on the planet.
I love that.
Yeah. So what has been the biggest challenge? I mean, that is quite an statement to say that the dev hiring is worse than it was in COVID. I mean, all hiring everywhere is just paused. I mean, to move from that to, I mean, it's not like things are getting built. It's just this impact of AI. I mean, not that I want to just do another AI podcast, but I mean, that is quite something.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a huge transition for us because at the time when hiring really spiked, we also scaled up our team. And so we went on a hiring spree in 2022. And at our height, we had 180 employees, and today we have 58. You know, so we've gone through a really big process of trying to right size the business for the level of the opportunity, and then finding out where the real opportunities really are for this business. And what was tricky about that, you know, in the event, we talked about the need to pivot, and that's sort of been the theme of OfferZen over the last few years. So I'll just take you through kind of the stages there and what that experience was like. So in 2022, we had a vision to make OfferZen a global SaaS platform business. And so we were thinking at the time, this is definitely a venture scale business. You know, we've got the platform, it works in South Africa, we've got great adoption here. Let's go take this into Europe. And the problem with that was that we were trying to create a category. You know, the idea of an online jobs marketplace where you have access to talent, but not help in securing that talent was a new thing, and obviously caught on in South Africa where we have great brand recognition, but was quite a difficult thing to push in Europe to say, here's a new product, a new type of product that you've never used before that we now need to sell you on. And we're going to try to sell you on hiring South Africans, which you may have no experience doing. And we were trying to sell people on hiring cross-border in Europe. And while there was this supposedly really big trend in interest in cross-border hiring post-COVID, that waned pretty quickly. You know, once we got into it, you know, the Dutch companies said, we'll hire people in Portugal or Romania, but they need to speak Dutch fluently. You know, and so there were big challenges there that just made it unsustainable for us to keep running the level of investment that was required to try to make that push in Europe. So we pivoted again and said, let's focus on only a small place in Europe. So just focusing on the Netherlands and on Germany, and let's limit the communities of practice within tech that we focus on so that we can specialize in things like .NET or DevOps, you know, et cetera. And we still just face similar challenges there with trying to create a new category of product and explain it to people and get them to buy into it. So pivot number 3 was coming back to South Africa and trying to push this idea of being a SaaS platform. And so we have always had this model where you can use OfferZen for free. You only pay if you hire someone. And we tried to transition that into a subscriptions model in the pursuit of being a full SaaS company. And the problem with that pivot was, you know, frankly, we just weren't really listening to customers enough. We didn't talk to customers enough. We pivoted too hard without really speaking to enough people and realizing that, you know, what built OfferZen to what it is today is the startups and scale-ups, you know, who don't have the money to go work with a big, you know, headhunter or recruitment agency. And that is the way that people got into OfferZen, was trying it for free and then realizing it works and then signing up for a bigger subscription model. And then the last part of that journey, after realizing that wasn't really going to work and bringing back that only pay per hire option, is we paused and said, look, we just need to speak to all the customers. We need to talk to everyone. We need to understand what's happening out there. And we realized two things. Then I'll get to the impact of AI as well. But we realized that people didn't have an access to talent problem. They had a hiring problem. So just giving them access to a platform wasn't enough. The engineering managers were saying, I was talking with a payments company. There were two engineering managers together managing 80 engineers. So they had absolutely no time. They said, we're working with 4 different agencies. We don't even look at the inbound applications. We don't even send take-home assessments anymore. And so we realized that this was a growing problem. And also that a lot of these engineering managers and CTOs didn't have a high amount of trust in their recruitment team. Because if you need your recruiter to find somebody with experience in multi-platform Kotlin app development, that's quite a difficult thing for somebody who has no experience in tech. And so we responded to that by now building out a services business where we take care of sourcing and screening on behalf of companies and for international companies. And actually, we're getting a lot of interest from local companies. We offer contracting as well. And so you don't need a legal entity in South Africa. You don't need to hire them on a permanent full-time basis. We act as the employer of record. They are OfferZen employees. We just invoice the companies. And as part of that, we take care of not just sourcing and screening, but we develop tech assessments, bespoke tech assessments for each role, and conduct the technical evaluations as well. And that is partly where we're seeing the impact of AI. So obviously, companies have sort of contracted their hiring to say, whoa, something's got to change. I don't know what it is, but something needs to change. And I think we're kind of still in that stage now. We speak with a lot of companies that are unsure how to change the composition of their team to better utilize AI. And interestingly, in our most recent State of the Developer Nation report, we asked about AI usage in a personal capacity and in a work capacity. So we asked for the adoption of AI coding assistants. And interestingly, it's still only 60% of devs in a personal capacity are using AI coding assistants, and only 38% of them are using them at work. And so the adoption in the workplace is not nearly as high as you would think it would be. I spoke with a friend recently who said that their company actually doesn't allow them to install any AI agents or any AI tools because of cybersecurity concerns. And so they rather want to build them in-house. And so it's interesting, you're seeing this phenomenon again where, Slack came out and people said, oh, I can build that Slack in-house. And then they try to, and the features don't really work that well. And it isn't built for scale. And then they say, oh, Slack is actually great. And I think we're kind of in that same transition now where people are trying to figure it out. But this is a very long response, but I guess the last points on what we're seeing so far in with AI and hiring, specifically in the dev space, is that more companies are looking for either AI capable or AI not interested, interestingly, developers. And so either people who are building something new from scratch, who want really fast prototyping, and people who are experts at lots of AI tools. But we also spoke with a company recently who said, I don't want anyone who's interested in using AI at work. We have these gigantic legacy frameworks. It's not going to be useful. They're not going to use it here. So I don't want to set their expectations that they're going to be able to use AI at work, because they're not going to. The second is that we're definitely seeing a reduced demand for junior roles. That's for sure. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out over time with the lack of junior opportunities that then lead into intermediates and seniors. And we're seeing a very big increase in demand for non-engineering roles, specifically in data, machine learning, data science, but also in huge interest in product management and management overall. And so you're seeing a need for people. I think the product manager is emerging as one of the most important players in this, to understand how to actually orchestrate these projects on swifter timelines, using AI and smaller teams. And I guess the last thing is more companies interested in AI capable engineers who are more embedded in the business strategy itself. So you're seeing this breakdown of the traditional wall between sort of business and tech, where the marketing person says, I want the website to do this, and they pass it over the fence. And then somebody who has no interaction with that person goes and builds the thing. People rather wanting the engineers actually spotting the opportunities, testing things quickly, and making the strategic decisions. What's that?
As it should be, as it should be.
As it should be. Yeah, and I think you see the most successful tech companies as the ones where the product squads have the largest degree of autonomy and making strategic decisions. And I think more and more companies are going to go in that direction. So the role of the engineer is changing. I'm not convinced yet that the demand for developer talent is going to continue to go down over time. I think it's actually just going to change and evolve and become more strategic.
So Matt, I mean, I wanna double click a bit on the AI part, because there's something that I realized in some of the conversations we have with people. Like, if you speak to someone that's got an established business, they've got a specific way how they think about AI, how they're introducing it. If you speak to a brand new business, it's actually quite scary how they're AI native with everything. Like, every single part of the business, they constantly think like, I'm not going to shoot a video. Can I make one with AI? I'm not going to do marketing. Can I automate it with AI? I'm not going to build customer support. Can I build customer support with AI? Right? And they fail in many of those areas, and then realize, okay, I'm going to have to do it a bit human. But the reality is the AI models are just going to get better. So when some of these companies succeed, they're going to be small teams getting a lot done, right? Compared to an established company that now has to compete with it, that has two problems. Like, the one is introducing AI disrupts business as usual. So you're busy making money. Now you have to risk making money because you're introducing AI. And secondly, the complicated matter of the fact that if you manage to replace someone's job with AI, you might have to retrench them, and no one actually wants to go and scratch there, because it's not a fun process. So how do you, as an established business, how do you guys think about AI and implementing AI within whatever you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think before I talk about how OfferZen does it, I think we are kind of seeing a similar scenario play out to when everyone was talking about digital business transformation. Where these legacy businesses needed to become digitally enabled businesses. And I think the ones that tended to do it well didn't force it down the throat of the entire company all at once, but sectioned it off into a squad of people who were specifically dedicated to innovating in that space, and then getting everybody else on board with what the new process is or what the new technology is. And I think we'll probably see similar things with AI as well. So one of the changes that we made, and then I'll talk about how our sort of philosophy on AI versus humans and the balance between the two, is we realized that our most senior people were now capable of building things very, very quickly. And so we moved our chief technology officer actually into an individual contributor role. So rather than organizing his life around the work that gets completed by his team, we started organizing the team a bit more around him producing work and shipping things himself. And so rather than having these long production cycles and how might we sessions and roadmaps and backlogs, you rather have one person owning something end to end, the entire thing, and they're spending all of their time just doing that thing. And so I think really engaging the very senior people, taking the principal engineers, the CTOs, the heads of engineering, get rid of some of the people management responsibilities and give them space to go play around, because they've got the most context of the business strategy, the customer, the history of the company. I think that is a very good move to consider.
That is smart.
And then in terms of implementing AI, so we've taken a very strong and very clear stance on this over the last couple of months, is that building out our services business, where we're doing a lot of the work on behalf of companies, a key thing there is none of those companies are using the OfferZen platform. They're not using the technology at all. We are using the technology to recruit very quickly for them, and then creating an experience that is very streamlined for them, where they don't really have to do much work. And so we are building AI powered tooling and AI agents internally to make our internal teams amazing at what they do. And then once the internal teams, and we call it like dog fooding, like eating your own food, your own product, once they say, yes, this is amazing, this is making me so much more efficient, then we'll deploy that thing to the marketplace. And so how we thought about the balance between AI and automation and humans is we're actually kind of leaning into the human component of it a little bit, because, and this isn't going to apply to all businesses, but hiring someone is a highly complex decision that is very difficult and very painful to reverse. And so it's critical at some moment in time for the client to know that there is some form of human judgment that's being applied in that process. And so we're using AI to create crazy efficiencies for the internal teams, and then finding these impressionable moments with the clients to say, I, the human, have taken a look at this, and I've used my judgment to say that this is actually the right thing. And so, yeah, we are leaning into the human component of it, because there is going to be a proliferation of access to tooling. But again, in the hiring space, people don't need access, they have a hiring problem. And so they want human judgment in there. So we're rather using AI internally, and then using that human judgment component to make a good impression.
I love that. So Matt, but I mean, you mentioned the CTO getting pulled out and going, cool, you're a single person contributor now, focusing on building, the next frontier of where we're going with this. And I love that. I love that thought. How can another company identify who the right person is within the company to actually take on such a role? I mean, in your case, one could say it's the CTO, but it's not the CTO in every company. There are certain qualities that make some people more prone to being good at a single operator using AI. Like how can one identify such a person?
Yeah, that is a complicated question. Part of me wants to say that it should be obvious to whoever is integrated into the engineering team. But I think a key component of it is, you're going to find these people who have really good ideas and are really good at prototyping something, but aren't really good at following through and iterating on that thing and really seeing it through to the end state. So I would say that's probably a big consideration, is that if you do have a just like super fast prototyping, distracted by shiny objects type of person, maybe they're the right person, but pair them up with somebody who is like a fixer and a strict perfectionist, and somebody who cares about the detail and the right and the wrong of the thing. So I think it's got to be somebody who understands the business strategy at a very deep level, understands the constraints at a very deep level, understands the customer at a very deep level, and then obviously has the technical ability and aptitude to be able to execute on those things, and not just stand them up, but build them into a place where they're actually sustainable. And I think a key part of this too is, so we did this with both our CTO and our VP product. He was still managing people, but he was building a lot himself. Is we had both of them attend the stand-ups of the service delivery teams every single day. So they're just hearing what the problems are, and then they go try to build something quickly just to solve the problem. No, okay, go back, do it again. So yeah, deeply embedded in the team, and yeah, somebody who can really see it through to a point where it's not going to break.
Yeah, a lot of what you said is the things that I'm a product manager by profession here, Matt. That's why I'm quite excited about the things that you're saying about there's that recognition of product managers that are needed in the market. But just some of these things that you've mentioned now is like what we've been trying to get done for a long time now. It's almost like AI is pushing them to say, hey, you guys need to be a little bit more involved. You have to be more boots on the ground. You have to, you've got the capability of running it end to end. And it is a personality thing, because not everybody wants to, hear about customer, complaints, pain points, and things like that. They just want to get into the nitty-gritty of building something. And you get different sizes of software, right? So you get a small little program, we're going to build this thing, but sometimes it gets pretty hectic. Like you're going to have many multiple integrations and this things, and the more features you're able to build, the bigger this beast becomes, which makes it more and more harder to manage. I've got a few questions around that. For example, like where does QA sit in all of this in the hiring stream? Because I mean, they for me are becoming even more important, because we're just throwing more and more software out there. How are we testing to make sure it's not breaking things? That's one piece of the question I have, but also I want to not forget about the independent contributor that you want to bring through, those personalities that you're bringing through, because you just said juniors aren't getting that opportunity. Surely there's a vacuum there. How do we get them in this new world to at least understand what it means to be in a software company? because we're not graduating them. We're not giving them that opportunity to understand what it means to go and listen to a customer pain point and understand what they need to go build and build themselves and understand the business needs, not just necessarily the coding needs. So there's quite a few chunks in there, but feel free to jump in there.
Yeah. So I think I don't have much to say about QA other than we are seeing a sort of moderate increase in demand for QA engineers, and that is one aspect where I think there is in our category a pretty big opportunity for South Africa and Africa more broadly, because for European companies, it's probably one of the first things that they're most comfortable kind of outsourcing, and we're in the same time zone, and so we are trying to push that a little bit more. I think in terms of how you set up the team, how you make the transition for the product team to have more autonomy when delivering on strategy, and then how do you incorporate the juniors into that process, I think there really is a mindset shift that needs to happen at the very top of the company. Because what happens is, if I just think back to my last company, we had this offsite once with the leadership team, maybe 200 people, and we did this thing called the SDI inventory, where you answer a bunch of questions, and there's this sort of triangle that's blue and red and green, and blue is kind of people focused, red is like action focused, and green is analytical, more inwardly focused, and then there are some spots in between. And what was interesting is all of the general managers and business unit leaders were in the red category, and the entire tech team and my team, which was the analytics team at the time, were all in the green category. And so what happens if you're the CTO or you're the CEO or the COO, and you hear that there's a business problem or an opportunity or a client's upset, who are you going to listen to? You're going to listen to the person who wants something done right now and has a strong viewpoint on what that is. And that's the person sitting in that red category, who's probably not the person in the product team. And so I think that for the CEOs, COOs out there, especially in larger companies, you got to go sit and listen to the product team and listen to their ideas, and not listen to the very loud voices who are screaming about something needing to be done right now, because the answer probably sits with the folks who are able to think through these more complex problems in a more kind of sustainable way. And I think in doing that, you also need to bring up the question of how do we fill up the pipeline of the juniors? Because I think we've definitely seen a contraction in the short term in demand for junior developers, but not actually in the proportion of placements that happen on OfferZen that are junior. People are still hiring juniors, but they're saying that they don't need them as much. And so I think you might find fewer people hiring directly out of things like coding boot camps, as an example, but potentially rather building those programs internally so that those juniors know the way that they do work, the way that they incorporate AI, the way that their product team plays a strategic role in determining what to build next. Because I really don't know where it's going to go. But I think it needs to start with a conversation, and I think the people at the top need to really, really listen to what's happening in the engineering space.
Awesome. Love that. So with our audience being very sort of startup, early stage, in their life cycle, what kind of advice would you say to them when they start building these teams? Maybe they've been able to use a prototype and they're getting a bit of traction or something like that. What would your advice be on now starting to build up their team? You've obviously been doing, as a recruitment specialist, trying to build teams. What does a team makeup look like in 2025 for a startup or early stage?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is find your principal engineer or your tech lead first. Find your most senior person first, because they're really going to set the tone for everything. They're going to set the culture with the team. They're going to set the standard with which work needs to get done. The second thing I would say is, and I'm not just saying this because I work at a company that helps companies hire people, but hiring is the most important decision you make. And 99% of the time when we talk with companies, it's the thing that they spend the least amount of time on. And so you just need to bite the bullet. You need to dedicate the time to finding the right person. And that's going to involve a fairly long process. So at OfferZen, we have an initial screening call, and then we have a work history overview interview. Mine was 6 hours. We went through every single job I've ever had, every single boss I've ever had. You definitely don't need to do a 6-hour one. And then after that, we do a take-home assessment. And then if that's passed and there aren't other interviews required, after that, then they move on to a full simulation day, which is an 8-hour day where they come in for a specific project, they work with the team internally, they get assessed by the entire team internally, and then it also gives the candidate an opportunity to see what it's like to work at that company. And so I think you need to have a viewpoint on what your hiring process is going to look like. You absolutely have to stick with it. You can't have any cross your fingers moments where it's like, the person didn't really do well in the sim day, but I really like them. No, you have to test them for the specific skills. And I think that's the most important thing. So yeah, I guess those are the two things that I would say immediately come to mind are hire the senior people first, because they're also going to know which people to hire. You know, if the first person you hire is a C+, they're only going to hire a C-. So get an A+ from the very beginning, who has a very low ego, and build out a very strenuous hiring process. It's absolutely painful, but out of the 58 people at OfferZen, every single person is a complete master of their domain. No one is on a performance improvement plan. I have no people issues, and it took us a long time to get all of those people, but it's much less time when you compare going through a mutual termination process to remove people when they're not a good fit.
Awesome. Love that a lot. So what I want to do now is start tapping into your background as marketing leads and heads of
Sure.
marketing. And I think I want to actually sort of bring it together, because in this world that we keep talking about, you know, where building things are a lot easier, people forget about the distribution of what you can build, right? So actually, it's like that go-to market. Okay, cool. Now we've built it and maybe we've got a bit of validation and some traction, but now I need to start growing it. And I think it's a piece that is generally missed, even in a settled company. They kind of forget about what it means to actually get to market and start getting that traction. So with that, I also want to tap into that pivot, right? So you've pivoted your business. How did you have to pivot your marketing and your distribution with your new business models that you were creating? Like, can you give us any stories and insights into that journey?
Many. Yeah, let me just organize my thoughts so I don't ramble too much. Okay, so a big part of the transition for us. So we've carried on with a lot of the marketing activities that we were doing, especially in performance marketing. That's kind of been always on. You're always refining that and figuring out what's going to work. But we realized over time that we needed much better first-party data. And I would recommend that to any company of any size, and especially if you are starting a new company. You need to have an active theory of who your customer is, and then have specific questions that you're gathering at specific moments in time in order to validate or invalidate that theory. And especially with restrictions being placed on the ad platforms, there's less kind of automation in terms of audience creation that you can use, especially in platforms like Facebook and Google. And so first-party data is becoming very, very, very important. And so we made a small pivot there to collect a lot more first-party data to understand the quality of the leads that were coming through, because we were generating a lot of leads, but we weren't generating a lot of customers out of them. And so we pulled away from volume and rather focused on quality, said we're going to accept a much higher cost per qualified lead. But today, those qualified leads convert to customers at almost 50%. And so with a reduced marketing budget, reduced team size, we really had to focus very strictly on quality. The second thing, and this is a very specific performance marketing thing, but we made the decision to turn off our branded search campaigns. And you'll hear varying opinions on this, and most people will say always bid on branded search. And we realized that, you know, the brand presence in South Africa is strong enough that even if somebody's competing against our keywords, the person looking for OfferZen is probably still going to come to OfferZen. And so that did save us a good chunk of money, you know, about like 300K a month, actually. So pivoting away from very heavy marketing investments and focusing on quality, we reduced that cost and rather put that into more brand awareness campaigns. And then we've done more partnerships as well. So we obviously partnered with the open letter on the event, with certain news publications. So rather than going just really broad in the ad platforms, focusing on specific niche audiences and speaking directly to those audiences. And let me see if there is anything else noteworthy in terms of the pivot. We really had to look at everything that we were doing and say, what is the most important? And we spend an incredible amount of money on t-shirts, as anyone who has used OfferZen knows, and our t-shirts are everywhere. And it is a big part of what built the brand in South Africa. And so in the pivot, and here pivot, I'm talking about reducing costs and doing more with less. We had to look at all of those line items and say, what is it that we're going to cut? And we said, you know what, non-negotiable is t-shirts. They're going to stay. Like, we should figure out cheaper ways to ship them and produce them, but we are going to keep them, because the way that we would kill this company is if we pissed off the community, and that's the last thing that we want to do. And so we really just want to keep the most loyal people as happy as possible.
So Matt, word on the street is that you are actually a t-shirt company that's monetizing through recruitment. Is that true?
To be a t-shirt company, we would need to get some revenue from t-shirts, which we do not.
Well, the revenue comes from the recruitment but it's a t-shirt company that monetizes through recruitment.
You know, at some point in time, I would love to set up an OfferZen online shop where people could purchase t-shirts, because we get requests all the time. You know, I want this one that I haven't gotten, and you know, where is this old design?
Special
I've collected these 5.
editions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's an idea there. There's an idea there. Matt, I have a question for someone that wants to start marketing as a startup, right? So the very first thing that they need to do is they need some kind of data points. So they need to get a cost per acquisition down. Like, what is a good tip to start? Because on the one side, I speak to startups, they go, listen, I'm happy to try like 5,000 Rand on Meta ads, or 1,000 Rand even. Like, and you know, sometimes that's enough, sometimes it isn't. But how would you go about using a small budget just to get some kind of cost per acquisition down to see if there is a positive return on ad spend?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if somebody is just starting out and they haven't done anything, the first thing I would say to do is get Google Analytics set up, just so you've got a lay of the land. Like, who are the people coming to my website? And from that, come up with your first party data strategy. So am I going to use a form? How long is the form going to be? Is it going to be type form? Is it going to be Webflow? You know, whatever it is. And then I said in the event that we had that I would stay away from using agencies. You can use an agency to get your accounts set up. You know, that can be quite a tedious process, and agencies will do that well. It's just getting the account set up for you and getting things like Google Tag Manager set up so you can actually see the events in GA properly. And then what I would do is have a couple of hypotheses that you want to test. So don't go into it blindly and just say, you know, I'm going to take one ad, I'm going to put 5,000 Rand behind it, and I'm going to put it in Meta, and I'm going to see what happens. I would take at least 2 variations. And the thing that people get wrong with these A/B tests is they test one tiny little difference. Just at the beginning, especially, test things that are dramatically different, completely different brand positioning, completely different messaging. And put your money behind that so that you have a good understanding of, is this platform going to work? And to what extent did the creative that I use actually influence that result? Because if you put shitty creative out into Meta, you're just going to get shitty results, and then you're going to conclude that Meta doesn't work when you may have just used the wrong creative. So I would definitely use variations, and then you're going to have to do some sort of back of the napkin math to create some assumptions around. And this is where GA can be particularly useful, is not just if X% of my website visitors turn into customers, what is my ROI, but go like one level deeper. And there's this thing in GA called engaged sessions, which is a much better measure of quality traffic to the site that I find to be quite useful and pretty consistent in the quality that it represents. And then understand what conversion rate you would be actually happy with, and is that in any way realistic based on industry benchmarks. And then the last thing that I would say is you should not expect for your performance marketing to be profitable from day one. If it is, then that is your signal go get as much money as you can and put it into this right now. But you
mortgage
should,
the house.
yeah, exactly. But you should expect to see a loss for a little while. And I would say at steady state, about a 3x return is probably okay for most companies. But if you're getting, 50 cents to the rand initially, that's a signal that there's probably something there, and you just need to tweak things a little bit more, whether it's with the audience, which is probably the problem, or the creative. And I guess the last thing that I would add is if you have no experience at all, don't do it by yourself. Like, just find someone online who knows about this, tell them your situation, ask them what they think would be a reasonable rate or a reasonable test, and go from there. But again, the agencies aren't going to do that for you. Find somebody who's an expert to give you guidance on that.
Yeah, if I can add a bit in there, because I recently had to set up some stuff myself, but what I found really useful is using ChatGPT as a tutor to help you set things up, which wasn't possible 2-3 years ago, right? So you can literally tell ChatGPT what you want to do, what you want to track, and then say, help me go and do this. So I've started by just simple implementation all the way through using make.com to pull in data from each of these sources to build me one sheet, to build me a Looker Studio dashboard. And that was from no skill, just ChatGPT guiding me step by step, which is pretty fun.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess one more thing I would add to that is if you're working with a really small budget, know that you don't have to go into the auctions. So you don't have to go into the Meta auction or the LinkedIn auction or the Google auction. You can also post something on Facebook. You could post something on Instagram or post something on LinkedIn, and then you can boost that post. And it is significantly less expensive than doing auction-based advertising. So if you've got, a good idea, you've got a decent presence on LinkedIn, boost that post so that you can get more impressions from it. And you could even boost something like a poll or something that's interactive where you can get some engagement to figure out who your audience might be. Like, that's if you're working with tiny budgets. I would probably recommend rather starting there.
I saw actually some of your posts getting boosted on LinkedIn, man, and I thought I'm gonna try it. So I had a post that went a little bit viral a few days ago. Always the warm, fluffy ones about South Africa. And then I actually went back and edited the post to add a link in to say sign up to the newsletter, yeah. And then we boosted that post, and it was the best cost per acquisition sign up to the newsletter we've had all year. Which is, and obviously the lifetime of that isn't as long, so now I have to figure out what I'm going to post
Sure.
next. But it
But it's
was a
super
very
cheap.
interesting experiment. Yeah.
So if you've got something to do
And
every
it serves
week,
multiple purposes, right? You get more connections on LinkedIn, get more impressions, you grow your page following, and you get a sign up. So there's that, it's a little bit of added value in doing it that way.
Yeah, we're testing those. They in LinkedIn they call them thought leadership sponsored posts. And just for context, right now we're only putting about 400 rand behind each of those. And the impressions that you get are way beyond that. So it remains to be seen, is it a good tactic for us for B2B acquisition? I think for somebody like you guys, B2C, it's definitely going to be a lot more effective. But yeah, it's a good place to start if it's not in the mix for anyone today.
Awesome. And so Matt, OfferZen going forward. I mean, you've got the presence in Europe. You mentioned that it's smaller. Do you see that presence increasing over time and maybe go over to the US, or how do you think about internationalization?
Sure. Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, trying to create a new category was not the right move for us with the amount of investment that we could put into it at the time. We would need to have gone much, much bigger. And there were quite a few tech talent marketplaces that popped up between 2021 and 2024. Literally all of them are dead. So the honeypots, the hired.coms, all of them are dead. They couldn't sustain that model, again, because people don't have an access problem, they have a hiring problem. And so what we did, early on after taking over as CEO and now having to think about what does this company look like in 3 years' time, I just took a step back and said, okay, let me lower my IQ as much as I can. And what would I do? I would go look at what the people who are winning are doing. And so I went and read the annual reports of the top 50 tech recruitment firms in the world. And it was immediately obvious that they're all winning through non-permanent placements, through contracting placements. So lots of companies are hesitant to take somebody on full-time. They either want to try them out for a year and then convert them to full-time, or they just don't want full-time on their books. And we actually see that quite a lot in South Africa, is people will say, I don't have any budget to hire full-time. I've got unlimited consulting budget and budget to use at developer houses and with contractors for whatever reason. And so that is the big pivot that we've made into services. And so our reach in Europe is growing now as a result of that. You know, immediately when we started offering contracting services, we just started getting referrals left and right from companies like Deal, for example, Deal.com, which is an employer of record service, but they don't do recruitment services. So what we're doing now, and I guess this is another pivot related to marketing, is rather than pushing OfferZen to everyone, we're rather focused on the ecosystem that can pull people to us. So making sure that our content is present on websites of companies that help people hire remotely, or give guidance on how to navigate cross-border hiring. And then the last thing, and this is sort of coming up for us and what's next, is really pitching OfferZen, especially to the UK, as a kind of preferred outsourcing and contracting destination as compared to Eastern Europe, India, et cetera, which I think is a really big and really exciting opportunity, not just for South Africa, but for Africa in general. You know, we are in the time zone, English native, highly educated, and we have a lot more talent in this country than we have opportunities. And so we definitely believe that the talent is equally distributed. It's just the opportunities that aren't. And so we're using contracting now as a way to try to grow that and allow more South Africans to take a job that is UK based without needing to leave Cape Town or Joburg if they don't want to.
That's awesome.
I have one last question, Matt, before we let you go, but it's something that I thought about recently, Renee. We were talking on another podcast, I think, about tinkering. I think it was the last interview we did. You have builders that like tinkering, they like doing things. So I wanted to know, Matt, what motivates you to be a builder? What motivates you to be a CEO and to build a company? What drives you?
Well, the big question for the end. There are a lot of things. I think, okay, so two things, well, I guess three things for me. One is I deeply love this brand a lot. It resonates with me personally. It is a community-based brand. We are out with the dev community all the time. I know these people. I send them messages on LinkedIn when they get placed on OfferZen. So there's a deeply human component to this that's sort of a dopamine hit every time someone gets placed. And that's a really fun challenge. You know, we're not selling accounting software. We're like helping people find amazing opportunities with great companies. And so being really connected to the outcome of what we're doing is a huge, huge motivator for me. The second is, you know, having come from 2U where I was employee 80, and as I mentioned, you know, when I left, there were 6,000 people. I had opportunities there, you know, equity opportunities with 2U that as a, you know, the youngest of 7 kids to a single mother in a rural community where we didn't even have television or Wi-Fi, I never believed that it would be possible to start accumulating any sort of wealth as an adult until I had that opportunity with a growing company. So it's deeply, deeply important to me to create those opportunities for everyone who's at OfferZen. And that is one of the big things that wakes me up every morning, is making sure that I can create life-changing opportunities for these people that I really, really appreciate. And the third one is, you know, I moved here in 2018 and I have absolutely fallen in love with South Africa. And I think South Africans don't give themselves enough credit. You know, when I originally came down here, I remember people saying, you know, we're just this country at the end of Africa. And now we're working with this big, you know, scary American company. And I quickly realized, you know, my marketing team there, I hope nobody in the States listens to this, but I was like, you guys are 10 times better than my marketing team in the States. and like super, super bright and super motivated and really hungry, not taking things for granted. And so I've just really fallen in love with this country. And I think if we can build out this business and connect people in South Africa and in the rest of Africa to opportunities abroad to improve their income and their wealth and their quality of life without needing to leave this country, that is a story that I want for South Africa and that I feel deeply personally connected to. So yeah, there are a lot of things, but those are the first three that come to mind for me.
I asked for one, I got three bombs, so that's fantastic. Yeah.
So Matt, maybe just one thing that I'm also curious about, like, what is a use case for AI that you simply cannot live without? And that could be either professionally or personally at the moment. Like, what is something that you go to AI for? Which AI, which tool are you using, and what do you use it for?
Let's see. Okay, I'll give you two examples, and these are probably going to sound really basic because they are. So I primarily use ChatGPT, and in the mini model, I set up a number of regular tasks that get completed on a weekly basis. And so, for example, there are a lot of questions and uncertainty around the impact that AI is going to have on developer hiring. And so I have a task for GPT twice a week to scan a certain number of news sources for which I've given it examples of the types and quality of content that I would appreciate and this type of stuff that I think is crap. And to summarize all of that for me in about 1,000 words every Tuesday and Thursday. And then if I were going to write something on LinkedIn based off of that, a couple of LinkedIn post ideas, those tend to be kind of corny. And you can sort of figure out when somebody's just using GPT to create thought leadership stuff that they don't really care about. So I don't really use that. But I think for regular kind of task management, like managing myself, and keeping myself disciplined about staying up to speed on certain things, I think it's very useful for that. And then the second, which is very basic but incredibly useful, is I was saying to one of the OfferZen employees recently, who's like growing into this analyst role. I just said to him, I use Excel or Google Sheets 20 times a day. Like you cannot be a CEO, COO, CTO, et cetera, without understanding how to use these tools and how to be very fast at them and how to be able to take something like, terms from a refinancing deal from a bank and be able to understand the thing thoroughly by understanding like the formulas within it. And so I use it quite a lot for things like Google Sheets and Looker. That's probably the thing that I couldn't live without because that's sort of my happy place as somebody who spent time as an analyst for a long time. And so, I could very easily waste a day figuring out how to write some macro in Excel to do something that I want. But GPT just speeds that up for me.
My favorite trick, speaking about Google Sheets, and I've actually become quite lazy with it. Like if I want to do something, I'll literally screenshot my screen so that it can see the fields and the columns and then go in block B5, I want you to do the following. And then it gives you this massive formula and you just paste it in there and it works. I'm like, this is the coolest use case for GPT for me by far. Like I mean, remember those days when a VLOOKUP doesn't work? Like, I mean, I don't even know how ChatGPT knows how a VLOOKUP works, but it just doesn't work. I'm like, I don't know why it doesn't work. So I don't have that problem anymore. GPT has solved that for me.
I like that, Renier. How do you AI? Okay, guys, this has been fantastic. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. We've covered quite a lot. So thank you very much, Matt, for joining and sharing all those amazing insights.
Pleasure.
And we'll be following the OfferZen journey and seeing if there's any more pivots in the horizon.
I love that new dinosaur unicorn suit you're wearing to events, Matt. It looks really good on you.
Thank you. I haven't worn it yet. I hear that it's very hot inside.
I can imagine.
But it is in the office here. But that's one of the marketing things we didn't want to budge on. We said, look, we're gonna spend some money and create a dinocorn mascot to bring to events to remind people that we're still here. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Stay tuned because there's more open letter events coming in.